The courtroom air was so stale it tasted like old dust and bad decisions. On the left side of the aisle, Marcus Thorne leaned back in his bespoke Italian leather chair, checking his Rolex. He smirked at the woman sitting across from him, his ex-wife, Eleanor. She was wearing a coat that had seen better days, staring at her hands, looking for all the world like a woman defeated. Marcus thought this was the end. He thought he was about to strip her of her dignity and leave her with nothing. But then, the Honorable Judge William Harrison opened a sealed blue envelope. The room went dead silent. The judge didn't look at the lawyers. He peered over his spectacles, eyes wide, and looked directly at the woman in the cheap clothes. "Miss Vance," the judge said, his voice trembling slightly. "Does Mr. Thorne know?" Eleanor slowly looked up, her eyes dry and cold. "No, Your Honor. He never asked." Marcus's smirk vanished. In the next 10 minutes, he would realize that while he was fighting over pennies, he had just declared war on a billion-dollar empire. The fluorescent lights of the Manhattan family court hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. But Marcus Thorne felt fantastic. He adjusted the cuffs of his navy Armani suit, ensuring the gold cufflinks caught the light just right. To him, this wasn't a tragedy. It was a victory lap. He looked across the mahogany table at Eleanor. She looked pathetic. That was the only word for it. She was wearing that grey wool cardigan he had always hated, the one that started to pill at the elbows. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was whispering anxiously to her lawyer, a court-appointed representative named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he hadn't slept since 2012. In contrast, Marcus was flanked by Sarah Sterling, a shark attorney from the firm Sterling, Price and Associates. She cost $800 an hour, and Marcus paid it gladly. Every dollar spent was a dollar used to crush Eleanor. "She's asking for alimony again," Sarah whispered to Marcus, not bothering to lower her voice much, citing loss of career opportunity during the marriage. Marcus let out a short, derisive laugh. "Career opportunity? Sarah, she was a barista when I met her. The only opportunity she lost was making latte art. Deny it. Deny everything. I want her leaving here with exactly what she came in with. Nothing." Elena didn't react to the laughter, but her lawyer, Mr. Henderson, shuffled his papers nervously. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson spoke up, his voice cracking slightly. "My client is simply asking for a temporary housing allowance. You kicked her out of the marital home 3 months ago. She is currently staying in a hostel in Queens." Marcus leaned forward, locking eyes with Eleanor. The cruelty in his gaze was sharp enough to cut glass. "She's staying in a hostel because that's where she belongs," Marcus said smoothly. "I offered her a settlement, $5,000, a generous go-away fee. She refused. Now she gets the consequences." The bailiff shouted, "All rise." Judge William Harrison entered the room. He was a stern man, known for his no-nonsense attitude and a distinct dislike for wasting time. He sat down, the heavy thud of files hitting his desk echoing in the silence. "Docket number 4492, the clerk announced. "Thorne v. Vance, final hearing regarding asset division and spousal support." Judge Harrison peered over his reading glasses. "I see we have a disparity in representation," he noted dryly, looking from the high-powered Sarah Sterling to the disheveled Mr. Henderson. "Let's keep this civil. Mr. Thorne, you are the petitioner." "Yes, Your Honor." Sarah Sterling stood up, projecting confidence. "Mr. Thorne is filing for a complete dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences. Furthermore, we are petitioning to enforce the prenuptial agreement signed by Ms. Vance 4 years ago, which waives her right to any of Mr. Thorne's business assets, real estate, or future earnings." The judge turned to Elena. Ms. Vance, do you contest the validity of the prenup? Elena stood up. She was shaking. No, Your Honor, I signed it. Marcus smirked. It was too easy. However, Elena continued, her voice gaining a tiny bit of steel, the prenup states that I am entitled to nothing acquired by Mr. Thorne. It does not account for assets held separately. Marcus rolled his eyes. What assets, Elena? He hissed across the aisle. Your collection of used paperbacks? The blender? Order, the judge warned. Your Honor, Sarah Sterling interrupted. This is a stalling tactic. Ms. Vance has no assets. We have her tax returns from the last 3 years. She filed 0 income. She has been a dependent of Mr. Thorne. We are wasting the court's time. Marcus felt a surge of triumph. He remembered the day he made her sign that paper. He had been so worried she was a gold digger. He was a VP at a mid-sized tech logistics firm, doing well, making about $400,000 a year. To him, that was rich. He had guarded his money like a dragon. He treated Elena like a lucky guest in his life, one who could be evicted the moment she stopped being grateful. I just want this over, Marcus whispered to his lawyer. Make sure the judge knows she's just looking for a handout. Ms. Vance, Judge Harrison said, looking at the weary woman. You filed a motion yesterday to submit a sealed financial affidavit. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Elena said. And why was this not shared with the opposing counsel? Because, Elena said, looking directly at Marcus for the first time that day. It contains sensitive information regarding third-party trusts that Mr. Thorne is not a beneficiary of. Under state law, since he waived rights to my assets in the same prenup he forced me to sign, he has no right to see the specifics unless the court deems it relevant. Marcus laughed out loud. Her assets? Your Honor, she doesn't even have a car. Judge Harrison slammed his gavel. Mr. Thorne, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. I will review the sealed document in chambers. As the judge picked up the blue envelope, Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. Let her play her little games. Maybe she had a secret savings account with a few $1,000s in it. Maybe she inherited a broken-down house in Ohio. It didn't matter. He watched the judge open the envelope. He watched the judge's eyes scan the first page. And then he saw something strange. Judge Harrison stopped. He squinted. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with his tie, put them back on, and looked at the paper again. His eyebrows shot up toward his hairline. He flipped to the second page, then the third, reading with a sudden, intense urgency. The air in the room changed. The boredom vanished, replaced by a thick, heavy tension. The judge slowly lowered the paper. He looked at Elena. It wasn't a look of pity anymore. It was a look of profound confusion and respect. Ms. Vance, the judge said, his voice dropping an octave. You are the primary beneficiary listed here? Yes, Your Honor. And the holdings listed on page 4, these are current? As of this morning's market opening, yes. Marcus frowned. What were they talking about? Market opening? Counselor Sterling, the judge said, turning to Marcus's lawyer. You were quite insistent on enforcing the prenuptial agreement strictly. Can you confirm for the record, one last time, that your client, Mr. Thorne, wishes to enforce the clause that states, what is his, and what is hers, with no crossover of marital funds? Absolutely, Your Honor, Sarah Sterling said, though she sounded slightly less certain now, picking up on the judge's weird behavior. My client wants a clean break. No asset sharing. So be it, the judge said. A strange smile played on his lips. Mr. Thorne, You have successfully protected your assets. You have also successfully excluded yourself from any claim to Miss Vance's estate. Good, Marcus said arrogantly. I don't want her debt. It's not debt, Mr. Thorne, the judge said softly. To understand the gravity of the bomb that was about to go off in that courtroom, you have to understand how Marcus and Eleanor met. 5 years ago, Marcus was an up-and-coming manager. He drove a leased BMW 3 Series and wore suits he couldn't quite afford yet. He was obsessed with image. He needed the world to know he was successful. Elena was a barista at the Roasted Bean, a small coffee shop near his office in the financial district. She was quiet, beautiful in an understated way, and she made his double-shot espresso exactly the way he liked it. He asked her out largely because he liked the way she looked at him, with admiration. Or so he thought. In reality, Eleanor looked at everyone with kindness. On their first date, he took her to a mid-range steakhouse. He spent the entire 2 hours talking about his quarterly bonuses, his plans to buy a condo in Tribeca, and his portfolio. Elena listened, nodding politely. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry. She ordered the chicken. You know, Marcus had said, swirling his red wine, I have to be careful. A guy in my position. Women try to latch on. Eleanor had smiled, a small, sad smile. I'm sure they do, Marcus. I value independence, he lectured. I don't mind paying for dinner, but I need a partner who pulls her own weight. What are your goals, Elena? Do you want to pour coffee forever? I'm actually studying, she said softly. History of art and some finance. Finance? Marcus laughed. Stick to the art, babe. Leave the numbers to the guys on Wall Street. He never asked what she was studying specifically. He never asked about her family. When she mentioned her parents were out of the picture, and she was raised by her grandfather in Connecticut, he assumed it was a sob story about a broken home. He didn't ask who the grandfather was. He didn't ask about her last name, Vance. It was a common enough name, like Smith or Johnson. It didn't ring any bells for a guy who only read tech blogs and sports news. They got married 2 years later. The wedding was Marcus's show. He invited 200 of his people, colleagues he wanted to impress, bosses he wanted to schmooze. Elena invited 3 people, 2 friends from the coffee shop, and an elderly man named Arthur, whom she introduced as her family attorney. Arthur wore a suit that looked old-fashioned, but if Marcus had known anything about textiles, he would have recognized the fabric as vicuña wool, worth more than Marcus's car. But Marcus just saw an old man in a dusty suit. The day before the wedding, Marcus dropped the prenup on the kitchen table. It's just a formality, Marcus said, avoiding her eyes. My lawyer insisted. I have the condo now, the investments. I have to protect my future. Eleanor picked up the document. She read it quickly. It says that in the event of a divorce, we leave with only what is in our own names. No alimony. No division of assets acquired during the marriage. Right, Marcus said, crossing his arms defensively. I work hard, Elena. I don't want to worry about losing half my stuff if we don't work out. Elena looked at him. She loved him. She truly did. She saw a scared little boy inside the arrogant man, someone desperate for validation. She thought she could love him enough to fix that insecurity. Okay, she said. Okay? Marcus blinked. You'll sign it? If it makes you feel safe, Marcus, I'll sign it. She signed it without hesitation. Marcus felt a rush of relief. He told his buddies at the bachelor party, she signed. She knows her place. She knows she's lucky to have me. He had no idea that by signing that document, Elena wasn't signing away her rights to his money. She was protecting her own, and she was protecting him from the reality of who she actually was. Because Elena wasn't just Elena Vance. She was Elena Vance Holloway, granddaughter of Silas Vance, the shipping magnate and industrialist whose company, Vance Logistics, practically built the eastern seaboard infrastructure in the 1950s. Elena was the sole heiress to a trust fund that had been compounding interest since 1975. She lived simply because she hated the pretension of wealth. She hated the fake friends, the gold diggers, the people who only liked her for her last name. She wanted to be loved for her. She took the job at the coffee shop to feel normal. She wanted a normal life, a normal husband, a normal home. She thought she found that with Marcus. She thought he was just a hard-working guy. But over the 3 years of their marriage, she watched him change. The higher he climbed in his career, the meaner he got. He criticized her clothes. He refused to let her work, saying it looked bad for his wife to serve coffee, but then mocked her for not contributing financially. He controlled the bank accounts. He gave her an allowance. She tolerated it. She tried to suggest counseling. She tried to plan dates. Then came the affair. Elena found the texts on his phone, a paralegal at his firm. The messages were brutal. "When are you going to leave her?" the paralegal wrote. "Soon," Marcus replied. "She's such a drag, creates zero value, just sits around the house reading books. I need someone on my level." That broke her. When she confronted him, he didn't apologize. He smirked. "Well," he said, "if you don't like it, leave. But remember the prenup, honey. You walk out that door, you walk out with nothing. No apartment, no money, no car. You'll be back on the street pouring coffee." He thought that threat would make her stay. He thought poverty was the leash he held around her neck. He watched her pack a bag. He laughed as she walked out the door. "You'll be back in a week," he shouted after her, "begging me to take you back." She didn't come back. For 3 months, she lived in a cheap hostel. She could have called Arthur, the family attorney. She could have accessed the emergency accounts. But Eleanor was stubborn. She wanted to grieve the marriage on her own terms. She wanted to see if Marcus had any humanity left. She waited for him to reach out, to apologize, to offer a fair settlement. Instead, he served her with divorce papers, demanding she pay his legal fees for wasting his time. That was the moment Elena Vance decided that being normal was overrated. It was time to be a Vance. The 3 months leading up to the court date were a lesson in humility that Elena didn't need, but endured nonetheless. She was staying at the Greenpoint Hostel in Queens. It was the kind of place that smelled permanently of bleach and damp carpet. She shared a room with 3 other women, a backpacker from Germany, a student from Ohio, and a woman named Brenda who was hiding from a debt collector. Elena had a bunk bed. The mattress was thin, and the springs dug into her back, reminding her every night of the luxury she had left behind, and the luxury she had walked away from years ago. It wasn't that Elena couldn't access money. One phone call to the Swiss branch of the Vance Family Trust would have had a black car waiting outside the hostel in 20 minutes. A suite at the plaza would have been prepared. But Eleanor was paralyzed by a strange cocktail of grief and stubbornness. She wanted to prove Marcus wrong. She wanted to survive on her own, just to show herself that she wasn't the helpless parasite he called her during their last fight. She picked up shifts at a local library, shelving books for minimum wage. She ate instant noodles. She rode the subway. But Marcus wasn't content with just leaving her. He wanted to erase her. 2 weeks before the court date, Eleanor returned to their old apartment building, a sleek high-rise in Battery Park, to pick up her mail. She had texted Marcus in advance. He had agreed to leave a box with the doorman. When she arrived, the doorman, a kind man named Henry, looked at her with pity. "Mrs. Thorne," Henry said, tipping his cap. He didn't leave a box." "He didn't?" Elena sighed, pulling her thin coat tighter. "He said he would leave my winter clothes and my mail." "He's upstairs," Henry whispered. "He told me to send you up if you came." Elena felt a knot in her stomach. She took the elevator to the 24th floor. The hallway smelled like the expensive reed diffusers she had bought last Christmas. She hesitated at the door, then knocked. The door swung open. It wasn't Marcus. It was a woman. She was younger than Elena, perhaps 23. She was wearing a silk robe, Elena's silk robe, the one her grandfather had bought her in Kyoto. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, popping a piece of gum. Elena stared at the robe. "I'm here for my things. I'm Elena." "Oh," the woman smirked. A cruel, knowing smirk. "The ex. Marcus said you'd look tired." She looked Elena up and down, sneering at her worn-out sneakers. "He's in the shower, but he told me to give you this." The woman reached behind the door and pulled out a black garbage bag. She tossed it into the hallway. It landed with a wet thud. "That's your stuff," the woman said. "Marcus said he needed the closet space. My things are moving in." "That's my robe," Elena said, her voice trembling. The woman laughed. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, sweetie. Besides, it fits me better." She slammed the door in Eleanor's face. Eleanor stood there, staring at the closed door. She could hear muffled laughter from inside. She bent down and opened the garbage bag. Inside, her clothes were soaked. They smelled like vinegar. He had poured vinegar on her clothes before bagging them. Tears pricked her eyes, but they didn't fall. She tied the bag, hefted it over her shoulder, and walked to the elevator. She didn't cry in the lobby. She didn't cry on the subway. She cried only when she got to a payphone on 42nd Street. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years. "Arthur," she said, when the line clicked open. "Elena?" The voice on the other end was raspy, aged, and immediately concerned. "My dear, where are you? The GPS on your old phone has been dead for years. I've been worried sick." "I'm in New York," she said, her voice hardening. "I'm done, Arthur. I tried to do it the normal way. I tried to be a wife. I tried to be simple." "And?" Arthur asked gently. "And it seems the world doesn't respect simple," Elena said. "Marcus is divorcing me. We have court in 2 weeks. He's trying to leave me with nothing. He humiliated me, Arthur. He destroyed my things. He has a mistress wearing my clothes." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Arthur spoke again, his voice had lost its warmth. It was cold, precise, and dangerous. It was the voice of a man who had managed the Vance Empire for 40 years. "What do you need, Elena?" "I need the file," she said. "The blue file, the full disclosure." "Are you sure?" Arthur asked. "Once you open that door, Elena, there is no going back to anonymity. The press will know. The world will know." "Let them know," Elena said, looking at her reflection in the dirty glass of the phone booth. She didn't see a barista anymore. She saw the granddaughter of Silas Vance. "Bring the file to the courthouse. And Arthur?" "Yes, my dear. Wear your best suit. We're going to war." Back in the courtroom, the silence stretched so thin it felt like it might snap and whip someone in the face. Judge Harrison was still holding the document. He had read the first page, and his demeanor had shifted from annoyed bureaucrat to a man witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Marcus, however, was growing impatient. He tapped his fingers on the table. Your Honor, Marcus said, breaking the silence. With all due respect, we have a schedule. Unless my ex-wife has hidden a winning lottery ticket in there, I don't see what the delay is. She has no income. She has no assets. Can we please proceed to the ruling? Sarah Sterling, Marcus's lawyer, kicked him under the table. She had been watching the judge's face. She knew something was wrong. Lawyers develop a sixth sense for disaster, and Sarah's alarms were ringing. Mr. Thorne, Judge Harrison said, not looking up. You really have no idea who you married, do you? Marcus scoffed. I married a barista who thought she was an artist. I know exactly who I married. No, the judge said. He finally looked up. He took off his glasses and set them on the desk. You married the sole beneficiary of the Vance estate. Marcus blinked. The what? The Vance estate, the judge repeated. He looked at the document. Ms. Vance, would you like me to read the summary of assets into the record, or would you prefer I summarize? Elena sat up straight. Her posture had changed. She wasn't the hunched woman in the cardigan anymore. She looked regal. Read it all, Your Honor, Elena said clearly. I want it on the record. I want Mr. Thorne to hear every single word. Judge Harrison nodded. He cleared his throat. Very well. According to the sworn affidavit from the Grand Cayman Trustees and the New York Federal Reserve, the assets held in the name of Eleanor Marie Vance Halloway are as follows. Marcus's brow furrowed. Halloway? Her name is Vance. Vance is her mother's name, the judge corrected. Halloway was her father. Silas Vance was her maternal grandfather. The blood drained from Sarah Sterling's face. Silas Vance, she whispered. As in, Vance International Shipping. The same, the judge said. He began to read. Item 1, 45% controlling stake in Vance Logistics and Shipping, valued at current market cap, $450 million. Marcus stopped breathing. The room spun slightly. Item 2, the judge continued, his voice monotone but loud. Real estate trust holdings includes the Vance estate in Connecticut, a penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, currently vacant, and a vineyard in Bordeaux, France. Total estimated value, $120 million. Marcus's mouth fell open. He looked at Elena. She was staring straight ahead, her face a mask of stone. Item 3, liquid cash reserves held in Swiss sovereign accounts, $75 million. Item 4, diverse portfolio including tech startups, municipal bonds, and gold bullion, $300 million. The judge flipped the page. Total estimated net worth, Judge Harrison concluded, looking directly at Marcus, is approximately $1.2 billion. The silence that followed was absolute. The court reporter had stopped typing, her mouth agape. The bailiff was staring at Elena. Marcus felt like he was hallucinating. 1.2 billion. Billion. With a B. He thought about the $5,000 he had offered her as a settlement. He thought about the allowance of $200 a week he used to give her for groceries, demanding she bring him the receipts. He thought about the time he yelled at her for buying brand-name cereal instead of the generic kind because they needed to save for the future. This is a joke, Marcus stammered. He stood up, his legs shaking. She's lying. She worked at a coffee shop. She wore cheap clothes. She begged me for money for a winter coat last year. I didn't beg, Marcus, Elena said softly, her voice cutting through the room. I asked. I wanted to see if you cared enough to provide for your wife. You told me to get an extra shift. But why? Marcus screamed, his composure shattering. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to be loved, Eleanor said. Not for my grandfather's money. Not for the buildings I own. I wanted someone to love me. I thought you did. I was wrong. Sarah Sterling, the shark lawyer, was frantically flipping through her own papers. She looked like she was about to be sick. She grabbed Marcus's arm. "Sit down, Marcus! Shut up!" "No," Marcus pulled away. A manic, greedy light had entered his eyes. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the realization of what this meant. He was still married. They were still legally husband and wife. He turned to the judge, a wide, desperate smile forming on his face. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice rising in pitch. This changes everything. I withdraw my petition for a total separation of assets. Obviously, there has been a misunderstanding. If my wife has these assets, then as her husband, I am entitled to my share. Marriage is a partnership, Your Honor, through sickness and health, for richer or poorer." He looked at Elena, putting on his most charming, manipulative face. "Elena, baby, I didn't know. If I had known you were burdened with all this stress, I would have helped you manage it. We're a team, right? We can fix this. We can fire these lawyers and go home. To our penthouse." Eleanor didn't move. She didn't smile. Sarah Sterling put her head in her hands. She knew what was coming. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Harrison said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You seem to have forgotten the document you spent the last hour demanding I enforce." The judge held up the prenuptial agreement. "The prenup," the judge said. "Yes, but," Marcus stammered. That was when I thought she was poor. It shouldn't count now." "The law does not care what you thought," Judge Harrison barked. "You had your lawyer draft this. You made Ms. Vance sign it under duress, though she signed it willingly. Let me read Clause 4, Section B, which you insisted upon." The judge put his glasses back on. "In the event of divorce, both parties waive all rights to any assets, income or property held by the other spouse, whether acquired before or during the marriage. Each party shall retain sole ownership of their respective titles. There shall be no equitable distribution." The judge looked over the paper at Marcus. "You were very specific, Mr. Thorne. You wanted to protect your 401k and your leased BMW. In doing so, you successfully waived your right to a single cent of your wife's billion-dollar fortune." "No," Marcus whispered. No, you can't do that. That's unconscionable." "It is perfectly legal," the judge said. "And frankly, Mr. Thorne, it is the most satisfying poetic justice I have witnessed in 20 years on the bench." "Sarah," Marcus grabbed his lawyer. "Do something. Fix this. Get it thrown out." Sarah Sterling stood up, slowly. She closed her briefcase. "I can't fix this, Marcus," she said, icily. "You explicitly instructed me to make that clause ironclad. You bragged about it. You said, and I quote, 'I don't want that gold digger getting a dime.' Well, congratulations. The contract is ironclad." "I'm firing you," Marcus screamed. "I quit," Sarah said, "and I'll be sending my bill." Marcus stood alone, trembling. He looked at Elena. He looked at the woman he had thrown away like garbage. "Elena," he pleaded, tears of frustration streaming down at his face. "Please, you can't leave me with nothing. I'm your husband. I love you." Elena finally stood up. She smoothed her cheap cardigan. She looked at Mr. Henderson, her court-appointed lawyer, who was grinning from ear to ear. "Mr. Henderson," Elena said, "I believe we are done here." "We certainly are, Mrs. Thorne." "Ms. Vance," Henderson said. "Wait!" Marcus lunged toward the table. "Elena, you can't just walk away. We have history." Elena walked around the table. She stopped right in front of Marcus. She smelled like cheap soap, but she looked like a queen. "We don't have history, Marcus," she said calmly. "We have a lesson. You taught me that money reveals who people really are. It revealed that you are small, cruel, and greedy. And now it's going to reveal who I am. And who is that? Marcus spat. Someone who is going to ruin you, she whispered. The walk from the courtroom to the front steps of the Manhattan family court was the longest walk of Marcus Thorne's life. Usually, when he left a negotiation or a meeting, he walked with a strut, chest out, chin up, checking his reflection in the shop windows. But today, his legs felt like they were made of lead. The echoing sound of the gavel hitting the wood played on a loop in his mind. Denied. 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 He stumbled through the heavy double doors and out into the biting cold of the New York afternoon. It had started to rain, a miserable, grey drizzle that soaked through his expensive suit in seconds. He looked around frantically. He needed to find her. He needed to fix this. In his delusional mind, Marcus still believed he could charm his way out of this. He convinced himself that Elena was just hurt, that this billionaire revelation was just a defense mechanism, and that deep down, she was still the shy barista who looked at him with adoration. "Elena!" he shouted, spotting her figure near the curb. She was standing next to Mr. Henderson, the disheveled court-appointed lawyer. But something was different. Two large men in black trench coats stood on either side of her. They were holding umbrellas over her head, shielding her completely from the rain. A sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb. It wasn't an Uber. It was a private car, the kind with bulletproof glass and diplomatic plates. "Elena, wait!" Marcus sprinted down the stairs, slipping on the wet concrete and nearly falling. He regained his balance and rushed toward her. One of the men in trench coats stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He simply held up a hand, a massive palm that looked like it could crush a brick. "Step back, sir," the man said. His voice was low, like a growl. "Get out of my way," Marcus panted, trying to peer around the bodyguard. "That's my wife. Elena, please, we need to talk. You can't just drop a bomb like that and leave." Elena turned. She hadn't entered the car yet. She looked at Marcus, soaking wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, his arrogance washed away by the rain and the truth. "I'm not your wife, Marcus," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried perfectly over the noise of the traffic. "As of 10 minutes ago, I'm just a stranger you used to know." "Elena, don't do this," Marcus pleaded, his hands shaking. "The money. I don't care about the money. I just want us back. I made a mistake. I was stressed. The pressure at work. You know how it is." Elena laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You don't care about the money? Marcus, you just tried to sue me for my half of a toaster oven. You care only about money. And that's fine, but you bet on the wrong horse." She turned to Mr. Henderson. The scruffy lawyer looked terrified, but delighted. "Mr. Henderson," Elena said, "thank you for your services today. I know you're a public defender and you don't usually get paid much, but I appreciate that you didn't treat me like a nuisance." Just doing my job, ma'am," Henderson stammered. "Arthur will be in touch with your firm," Elena said. "I think you'll find your student loans are no longer a concern." Henderson's jaw dropped. Elena turned back to the car. "Elena!" Marcus screamed again, desperation clawing at his throat. "What about me? What am I supposed to do?" She paused with one hand on the car door. She looked back at him one last time. "You have your apartment, Marcus. You have your leased BMW. And you have your freedom. You got exactly what you asked for. Enjoy it." She slid into the leather back seat. The heavy door thudded shut with a sound of finality that echoed in Marcus's soul. The Maybach pulled away, disappearing into the sea of yellow taxis. Marcus stood there in the rain for 10 minutes, staring at the empty spot where the car had been. Passers-by looked at him, a man in a ruined Armani suit, weeping openly on the sidewalk, and kept walking. In New York, a crying man in a suit wasn't a tragedy. It was just Tuesday. The cab ride back to his apartment was a blur. When Marcus unlocked the door to his luxury condo in Battery Park, he expected some comfort. Instead, he walked into a war zone. Jessica, the mistress, the 23-year-old paralegal who had mocked Elena just 2 weeks ago, was in the hallway. She had a suitcase open. She was throwing clothes into it. "Jessica?" Marcus asked, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. "What are you doing?" Jessica didn't look up. She was furiously packing her makeup bag. "I'm leaving, Marcus. Leaving. Why?" "Baby, I've had the worst day of my life. I need you." She stopped and looked at him. Her eyes were cold. "I heard." Marcus froze. You heard what?" "I have friends at the courthouse, Marcus. The clerks talk. Everyone is talking. It's all over the legal gossip blogs already. Mid-level manager dumps billionaire heiress for paralegal." She laughed cruelly. "Do you know how embarrassing that is for me? I look like an idiot. I left a guy at Goldman Sachs for you because you said you were going places. I didn't know you were leaving $1 billion on the table." "It wasn't my fault," Marcus yelled. "She hid it from me." "She hid it because she knew you were a loser," Jessica spat. She zipped up her suitcase. "And she was right. You're not a shark, Marcus. You're fish food. And I don't date fish food. You can't leave." Marcus blocked her path. "I pay the rent here. I bought you those earrings." "Keep the earrings," she said, pushing past him. "They're fake anyway. Just like you." She slammed the door. Marcus was alone. He looked around the apartment. Suddenly it didn't look luxurious. It looked small. The furniture looked cheap. The view of the brick wall across the alley seemed mocking. He went to the fridge to get a beer, but it was empty. He remembered he used to yell at Elena if the fridge wasn't stocked. She used to do the grocery shopping, walking 10 blocks to save money on delivery fees, carrying heavy bags while he sat on the couch watching football. He sank onto the floor. He picked up his phone. He had 45 missed messages. None of them were from friends offering support. They were from his co-workers. They were links to news articles. The New York Post, "The $1 billion mistake. Local man divorces, secret heiress, enforces prenup that leaves him penniless." Daily Mail, "Vance Logistics, heiress revealed in shocking divorce court drama." There was a picture of him. A bad one. He looked sweaty and angry, and next to it, a picture of Eleanor leaving the courthouse, looking like Grace personified. Marcus threw his phone across the room. It smashed against the wall. He had lost his wife. He had lost his dignity. He had lost his mistress. But he told himself, as he lay on the floor in the dark, that at least he still had his career. He was the vice president of regional sales at Apex Logistics. He was good at his job. He made the company money. As long as he had his job, he could rebuild. He could climb back up. He closed his eyes, unaware that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere at Apex Logistics was tense. Rumors had been swirling for days. There were whispers of a hostile takeover. The CEO, a nervous man named Mr. Gables, had been seen sweating through his shirts and taking private calls in the conference room with the blinds drawn. Marcus tried to ignore the noise. He buried himself in work. He needed a win. He needed a bonus. His lawyers, the ones he had to hire after firing Sarah Sterling, told him he still owed Sarah $15,000 in legal fees, and since the prenup was valid, he had to pay it himself. He was currently working on the Redwood account, the biggest shipping contract Apex had. If he renewed it, he was safe. "Thorne," Marcus looked up. It was Jenkins, the office gossip. "Did you hear?" Jenkins whispered, leaning over Marcus's cubicle. "The board called an emergency all-hands meeting. 10 minutes. Main conference room." "What for?" Marcus asked, annoyed. "The buyout," Jenkins said, his eyes wide. "It's confirmed. Someone bought the company. Lock, stock, and barrel. Cash offer. They say the new owner is coming to address the staff today." Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. Buyouts usually meant layoffs, but he reassured himself. "I'm essential," he thought. "I run the sales division. They can't fire me." He grabbed his notepad and straightened his tie. He walked into the conference room. The room was packed. Every employee from the receptionist to the CFO was there. The air was thick with nervous energy. At the front of the room, Mr. Gables stood by the podium. He looked pale. "Everyone, please take a seat," Gables said, his voice trembling. "As you know, Apex Logistics has been struggling with liquidity for the last 2 quarters. We sought a buyer to save the company from bankruptcy." Murmurs broke out across the room. Bankruptcy? Marcus hadn't known it was that bad. "We were fortunate," Gables continued, wiping sweat from his forehead, "to find a buyer who sees potential in our infrastructure. A buyer with the capital to modernize us and take us global. The acquisition was finalized this morning." The double doors at the back of the room opened. "Please join me in welcoming the new owner and chairwoman of the board," Gables said, bowing his head slightly. The room went silent. 2 bodyguards walked in first. Then, a woman. She was wearing a white power suit that was tailored to perfection. Her hair was down, cascading in waves over her shoulders. She wore heels that clicked rhythmically against the floor. She walked with a confidence that sucked the air out of the room. Marcus stopped breathing. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. It was Eleanor. But it wasn't the Eleanor who made coffee. It wasn't the Eleanor who wore cardigans. This was Eleanor Vance, the billionaire, the shark. She walked to the podium. She didn't look at the crowd immediately. She placed a single folder on the lectern. Then she looked up. Her eyes scanned the room. They passed over the accountants, the HR reps, the junior sales associates. And then they landed on Marcus. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just stared at him for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Marcus felt his soul wither. "Good morning," Elena said. Her voice was commanding. "My name is Elena Vance. I represent Vance International. As of 9 a.m. today, Apex Logistics is a wholly owned subsidiary of my firm." The room erupted in polite applause. People were relieved they still had jobs. Marcus didn't clap. His hands were frozen at his sides. "I have reviewed the financials of this company," Elena continued, "and frankly, they are embarrassing. There is bloat, there is inefficiency, and there is a culture of mediocrity that ends today." She opened the folder. "We will be restructuring," she said. "Most of you will keep your jobs. However, there will be changes in leadership. We need leaders who understand the value of people, not just profits. We need leaders who are honest." She looked at Marcus again. "Mr. Thorne," she said. The whole room turned to look at Marcus. He felt the blood rush to his face. He stood up, his legs shaking. "Yes, Miss Vance," he squeaked. "You are the vice president of sales, correct?" "Yes," Marcus said. He tried to sound confident. "I manage the Redwood account. It's our biggest earner." "Actually," Elena said, flipping a page in her folder, "the Redwood account called me this morning. They are cancelling their contract with Apex." Gasps filled the room. "What?" Marcus stammered. "Why? I have a great relationship with them. They told me they don't like doing business with people who lack integrity," Eleanor said smoothly. "Apparently, News of your personal conduct has reached our clients. It seems bad character is bad for business." Marcus felt like he was going to vomit. This was a nightmare. "However," Elena said, closing the folder, "I am not a cruel person. I don't believe in firing people without cause, and legally, your sales numbers are adequate." Marcus felt a tiny glimmer of hope. Maybe she would spare him. Maybe she still had a soft spot. "But," Elena continued, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips, "I am dissolving the sales department of Apex. It will be absorbed by Vance Logistics HQ in Seattle." "So, I'm being transferred?" Marcus asked. "No," Elena said. "The executive roles are being made redundant. You are welcome to stay on, Mr. Thorne. But the only open position we have available for your skill set is in the sanitation and maintenance division." The room went deadly silent. "Janitorial?" Marcus whispered. "You want me to be a janitor?" "It comes with benefits," Elena said, shrugging, "and a steady wage. It's honest work, Marcus. Far more honest than what you've been doing for the last 5 years. "I quit," Marcus yelled. "You can't do this to me. This is harassment." "It's corporate restructuring," Elena corrected him calmly. "But if you choose to resign, that is your right. However, you should know that Vance International has also just acquired the 3 other major logistics firms in the tri-state area, and we have a strict no-rehire policy for former employees who walk out." She leaned into the microphone. "So, if you walk out that door, Marcus, you won't work in this industry again. Not in New York, not anywhere." Marcus looked at the door. He looked at Elena. He looked at his colleagues, who were staring at him with a mix of pity and disgust. He realized then that the cage he had built for Elena, the financial control, the dependency, had been dismantled, and she had built a new cage, a much bigger, stronger cage, and she had just locked him inside. Marcus choked on the words. I have a mortgage." "Then I suggest you grab a mop," Elena said coldly. "The 3rd floor men's room is a mess." She turned away from him, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a speck of dust. "Now," Elena said to the rest of the room, her voice bright and professional, "let's talk about the future." As Elena began her presentation on quarterly goals, Marcus Thorne, the man who thought he was a king, slowly sank back into his chair. He was ruined. He was owned. And the worst part was, he knew he deserved every second of it. 6 months had passed since the acquisition. The winter had turned into a humid, sticky New York summer. Marcus Thorne was no longer wearing Armani. He was wearing a navy blue jumpsuit with the name Apex Maintenance stitched over the pocket. He had lost 15 pounds, and his hair, once perfectly gelled, was thinning and grey at the temples. He was currently buffing the marble floors of the executive lobby, the very same lobby he used to walk through like he owned the place. Now, the new sales executives, young and hungry sharks just like he used to be, walked past him without even seeing him. He was invisible. It was 8:10 p.m. The office was mostly empty. Marcus switched off the buffer and wiped sweat from his brow. He was exhausted. "Mr. Thorne," the voice came from the shadows near the elevators. Marcus jumped, dropping his rag. It was Arthur. The old man was leaning on a cane, wearing a tuxedo. He looked like he was on his way to the opera, a stark contrast to Marcus's stained jumpsuit. "Arthur," Marcus said, his voice raspy, "if you're here to mock me, spare me. I've cleaned the toilets. I've taken out the trash. I'm doing my penance." Arthur walked slowly toward him, the tap of his cane echoing on the freshly polished floor. "I'm not here to mock you, Marcus," Arthur said. "I'm here to close the file. Elena is in Paris. She's happy, She's starting a foundation for women who have been financially abused. She doesn't think about you anymore." "Good for her," Marcus spat bitterly. "She won. She has the billions. I have a mop. What else is there to say?" Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't the blue legal file from the courtroom. It was old parchment, sealed with red wax that had been broken long ago. "You know," Arthur said, staring at the envelope, "Silas Vance, Elena's grandfather, was a brilliant man. But he was also a paranoid man. He knew that Elena, being the sole heir, would be a target for fortune hunters." Marcus rolled his eyes. Yeah, I know. That's why she hid the money. I get it." "No, you don't get it," Arthur said sharply. "Silas didn't just want to protect the money. He wanted to reward character." Arthur handed the envelope to Marcus. "What is this?" Marcus asked, his dirty hands trembling as he took the pristine paper. "This is the codicil to the Vance Trust," Arthur explained. "It was drafted 10 years ago. Read the highlighted paragraph." Marcus squinted at the fancy script. He began to read aloud, his voice shaking. "In the event that my granddaughter, Elena Marie Vance, marries, a separate trust fund shall be activated for her spouse, herein referred to as the Partner Trust. This trust is designed to ensure that the husband of the heiress never feels inferior or financially dependent, thus preserving the balance of the marriage." Marcus looked up, his eyes wide. "What?" "Keep reading," Arthur commanded. "However," Marcus read, "this trust is subject to a strict condition. The spouse must prove that his intentions are pure. Therefore, the trust shall only be released to the spouse on their 5th wedding anniversary, provided that the spouse has never requested, drafted, or signed a prenuptial agreement separating assets." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. The room started to spin. "If the spouse refuses a prenup," Marcus read, choking on the words, "or insists on sharing his own assets freely with Eleanor, he shall be deemed worthy. Upon the 5th anniversary, he shall be granted a lump sum of $50 million, tax-free, from the principal estate." Marcus dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the wet marble. $50 million. He stared at the wall, his mind racing back to that day 5 years ago. He remembered Elena sitting at the kitchen table, looking at the prenup he had thrown at her. He remembered her asking, "Are you sure you want this, Marcus?" She wasn't asking because she was afraid of losing his money. She was asking because she knew about the test. She was giving him a chance to pass it. She was giving him a chance to be rich beyond his wildest dreams, just by being a decent human being. "She knew?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "She knew," Arthur confirmed. "She loved you, Marcus. She wanted you to pass the test. She hoped you would tear up that prenup and say, 'I trust you.' If you had done that, you would be sitting on $50 million right now. You would be traveling the world with a wife who adored you." Arthur leaned in close, his eyes hard as flint. "But you were so afraid of losing your little condo and your 401k that you signed away a fortune. You were so busy protecting your pennies that you walked right past the gold mine." Marcus fell to his knees. A guttural sound ripped from his throat, a laugh that sounded like a sob. It was the sound of a man who realized the joke was on him, and it was the funniest, cruelest joke in the world. "I did it to myself," Marcus gasped, clutching his chest. "I did it all to myself." "Yes," Arthur said, adjusting his cufflinks. "You did. Greed is a funny thing, Mr. Thorne. It blinds you to the very thing you're chasing." Arthur turned around and began walking toward the exit. "Oh, and Marcus," Arthur called back without looking. "You missed a spot near the plant. Make sure it shines. Elena is visiting the office next week, and she likes clean floors." The elevator doors opened and closed, taking Arthur away. Marcus stayed on his knees in the empty lobby of the company he used to manage, staring at the wet document on the floor. The ink was starting to run, the words blurring into a grey smudge. He had won the prenup. He had protected his assets. And in doing so, he had lost everything that ever mattered. He picked up his rag. He dipped it in the bucket. And he started to scrub. Marcus Thorne spent his life calculating the value of everything, but he never understood the value of anything. He thought he was the protagonist of his own success story, but he was actually the villain in a tragedy of his own making. The irony wasn't just that Eleanor was rich, it was that Marcus's own greed was the specific key that locked him out of paradise. He fought so hard to keep his crumbs that he threw away the entire banquet. In the end, the courtroom didn't destroy Marcus. The divorce didn't destroy him. The moment that destroyed him was 5 years prior, when he decided that a piece of paper was more important than the woman sitting across from him. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve a lifetime of mopping floors, or was the grandfather's test too cruel? If you believe that karma always collects its debt, hit that like button right now. And if you want more stories about instant justice and dramatic twists, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss the next one. Trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.